Ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs, the tweet accompanying this video literally read, quote, "This man is held in high regard across the globe. Exudes class, intelligence, and decency," followed by the Canadian flag emoji. And no, I don't think they were intending to be ironique.
Let me just begin by acknowledging what you're all feeling, I think, and the nation's feeling. The terrible injury of Ishmael. Blessure terrible, Monsieur Carney. And it's in moments like that that you see character, reality. He applauds the fans coming off. He shakes the hands, the guitars coming off. Saliba comes on, steps up, scores. You hold up his jersey. You celebrate around it.
I'm going to pause it.
Keep your cool. You show the nation.
I'm going to pause it because I've had enough vomit for the day, and I'll tell you what I mean in a second. Let me make sure that we're live just before we get going. I'm on the road, as you can all see. The audio is going to be substandard. You might hear my dog in the backdrop. That is the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark J. Carney. And no, it wasn't intended to be satire. Troy Westwood, husband, dad, sports, fitness, youth. You may or may not have even realized what you were listening to, but for a brief second in there, Mark J. Carney, the former, I have to correct myself now, the former 3-passport carrying globalist whore. 3 passports. He relinquished his British passport and his Irish passport. For a brief moment in there, he was trying to pretend that he knows how to speak French.
Realty. He applauds the fans.
Where was it?
And it's in moments like that, injury of Ishmael.
Now. Terrible injury.
Blessure terrible.
Blessure terrible. He has to try to pretend to remind the world that because he's the Prime Minister of Canada, that he's somehow bilingual. Listening to him speak French is like listening to that baby in the movie The Exorcist speak in tongues. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to waste much more time on the show introduction than that. That is Mark J. Carney addressing the soccer team. No, I have to bring it back. I keep telling you that these are politicians who fancy themselves as superstars, rock stars. They think they are the new God to reign over the lowly plebs. And while they tax you, steal your money on the way out of the country in death, they sit there addressing soccer fans like they are Oasis. Looking at him, it makes me think like that's what Liam Gallagher walks around thinking, except Liam Gallagher is one of the 2 best members of the greatest band of all time, right? People, it's Father's Day. We are driving on a long road trip. And I'll just tell you how my Father's Day got started. And I'm not complaining. I just want you to understand. We're at a hotel. We got both dogs, 2 kids. I don't have the wife and another kid. And we always end up sleeping in the same bed. I wake up in the morning and I see what appears to be a crumpled up sock on the ground. Except none of us have been wearing socks because we're all wearing Crocs. But because it's early in the morning and I'm half asleep, I decided to nudge the sock with my foot. 'Twas no sock. 'Twas a nice little dookie that the dog had left over. And I clean it up, thinking I cleaned it all up. And then one of the kids who didn't see a little nugget that I left over seemed to have stepped in that nugget and then, crawled back into bed. Then we get in for an 8.5-hour drive. And I've been telling everybody, if you're a member of our locals community, I've been saying, I don't understand what Manny, our new adopted dog, is, what his problem is with the car. But he doesn't like going into the car. And I think I've now discovered why. He gets car sick. He threw up twice in the back of the car. The other dog, for whatever the reason, decided to follow suit and throw up. So we're driving 3 people, 2 dogs on 8.5 hours. And actually, the worst of the vomit happened 10 minutes before our destination. So that is the Father's Day treat, and I told the whole story to our locals community, and they said, look, it's not Father's Day unless you get the Father's Day treatment. And that is the Father's Day treatment. Like, the dog, I thought he's a rescue. Man, you want to come here? I thought he's a rescue. Come here. Get over here. He won't come to me because I think he thinks I'm going to bring him back to the car. I was like, oh, he's got some deep-rooted trauma because he was used for breeding and they must have stuck him in a car. And I don't know, or he's been abandoned and he associates being abandoned with the car. I think he just got car sickness and he associates car sickness with the car. So that is what's going on this Father's Day. He will come to me. Actually, hold on. I got to get the other dog in here. Give me 1 second because we are living large tonight. Bring Winston back into this room, period. We only have the dog room for one room. We're living large. We got 2 rooms tonight so that I could do the live stream in peace and quiet. And no, people, there is no choice for higher speed internet. I asked. So tomorrow night, I'll be on with Tim Pool. Check it out. It's going to be amazing. And that is it. Let's see what's going on in the chat. First of all, happy Father's Day out there to every father, to people who are father figures. And I jokingly say, like the birthday is behold my genitals work, and Father's Day is behold my genitals work. Knock on door. Here. Give me 1 second. And we've got a good show tonight. It might be a little bit shorter than normal. Hold on 1 second. Let me get one dog in here. Don't let the dog in. Okay, bring it. You got your food? Oh, what? I have nothing but you take this if you need to come back in. Get up. Go. All right, people. Huh? Okay, fine. That's good. Thank you. No, take yours. Oh, is that the second one?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, this is yours.
Okay, yeah, go. Don't get them confused. Don't let the dog go. All right. We're live. We're gonna wait until Barnes gets in here. Is Barnes in there? No, that's Mark Carney. It's like, holy crap. Barnes put on a nice jacket. All right, let's get this out of here. So we are live across YouTube, Rumble, vivabarneslaw.locals.com, and our awesome community at Viva Barnes Law, and on X is what I was about to say. If I miss any of the tipped questions or Rumble rants, Pasha Moyer says, yeah, I also associate cars with car sickness. Manny, I'm right with you. It's the weirdest thing. I go up to get him. He does that. Like he gets on the ground like a spider. And, oh, dude, Barnes is looking badass tonight. Oh, Robert, sir.
All right.
No, there's no. Oh, okay. There is audio. It's a little bit lagging. No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I'm going to ask locals if the audio levels are off, just because we are both on the road. Audio levels good. Robert, say something so we can get a level here.
This is a Scottish hat made from Scottish wool. Wore it for the Scotland-Morocco World Cup game. Well, the Scottish fans were great. They were on the unlucky side of that outcome, but they still might make an advance. They have traveled all the way from Boston down to the Tartan Army is heading down to Miami to play the Brazilians. You talk about a party. You got the Brazilians on the one hand and the Scots on the other. One of their favorite chants is "No Scotland, no party." But they'll be partying right near your neck of the woods. You go down there and hang out with some Scots and some Brazilians, get their take on the world.
Well, I've always been told that I'm part Scottish because I like Scotch. And my favorite beer, I'm fairly certain it was called Tartan. I'm fairly certain my favorite beer was it's called Tartan. It's delicious. So you're still on the road, Robert?
Yeah, on the road until July 4th.
Amazing. Well, you look like you got a nice place back there. You got the tree growing out of the back of your head is very symbolic.
Yeah, at my brother's place. It may have been my niece. She likes to do all kinds of art, like anime and all that kind of jazz. So or they just picked it out. But yeah, it's fun. I haven't been up here in about 7-8 years, so got a chance to make it back to his place in upstate New York.
Amazing, and we got a good show. I mean, it wasn't the biggest week for news, but we got 3 Supreme Court decisions. Hunter Biden. What was the other one? That was the Second Amendment, and the 3rd Supreme Court decision. I'm blanking on it right now.
Well, they're kind of technical ones, but they have broader consequence because they involve appellate rights. When can they be waived? When they cannot, and broader context of federal jurisdiction over supervisory, or whether they have supervisory power or not. And as well, the Rooker-Feldman doctrine roared its ugly head, got back through a 5-4 majority as excuses to cover for state court corruption and collusion. So but they were very technical cases, so that unless you understand the broader public policy ramifications, they don't get a lot of legal news attention in the generic press. But this week and next week we'll have tons of it, because this is the last week and last 2 weeks of the Supreme Court's term before the July 4th break. And they usually off for 2 months, because it's hard work writing 60 opinions a year, by the way. That's really tough for those Supreme Court justices. Maybe Ro Khanna has a point about adding some justices. Maybe just don't make it as partisan as it obviously is, Ro. God bless you. But because we've got all the big decisions coming down. And the top topics tonight, the number one topic was the great Tulsi Gabbard on her last day out. I think it will come out down the road. She was kind of forced out earlier than she wanted to go, but that'll be another story for another day. She made sure to get out her biolab report last week, and she tied it all up with a nice little pretty bow on her last day, detailing the corruption, the nastiness, the degree of Dr. Evil that is the one and only Dr. Fauci. That'll be our top topic. What the SCOTUS we'll try to predict where some of these big cases are going to come down. Which they start on Tuesday, then on Thursday, then on next Tuesday, then on next Thursday. All 20-plus decisions are going to be wrapped up. And then we have the current SCOTUS cases, a little Don Lemon case, the exit tax issues, and a few other fun topics to throw in.
Before we even get started, if you had to pick one of the outstanding decisions that could trigger a summer of love, which case would it be, and which group doing the loving would it be?
The birthright citizenship. The birthright citizenship, if they were to say henceforth that there's no constitutional right to citizenship by place of birth, then that's going to trigger a lot of controversy. A lot of the other cases that might be very upsetting to the DC establishment if the Supreme Court makes certain decisions, such as the bureaucratic power of the Fed, the bureaucratic power of the federal government in general, the degree to which it is immune from elected officials like the president of the United States. And there's other ones. There's big geofence warrants on the Fourth Amendment, big about the future of the surveillance state and the big tech empire. The First Amendment, the cases concerning the limitations that they can impose on a range of organizations, institutions. Big Second Amendment case on Hawaii. Had they created the perfect loophole to carve out your Second Amendment rights by creating a default presumption you can't go to any place that has any degree of private ownership or not, basically restricting your Second Amendment rights to just your home in a public park. That case has big ramifications. But the ones with the most mail-in voting, do you have to actually have the ballot received on election day, at least for federal elections? I'll usually apply to state elections ultimately. Look at what's happening in California. So that might have major descriptions. Oh, apparently somebody was ticked off. That's a great.
I don't believe that's real.
That can't be real. There's a lot of these AI going around. Some poor German fan was partying, celebrating a victory earlier in the week, and somebody took his face and memed Hitler over it. So they made it look like Hitler was there celebrating for the Germans. And the worst part is the poor ordinary German just got wiped out of the meme. Out of the photo. It doesn't exist. His face has been remade into Hitler. So also they're doing this with hot chicks. So they're having a bunch of hot chicks look like they're there at the game in a bunch of uniforms. It's AI. It's about 80% AI. Not 100%, because I was at the game at some of the World Cup games, but about 80%. Then Brazil, Scotland, well, particularly the Brazilian side. God bless the Scots. Let's just say there's a lot of admirable scenery, you might say. That one fan got caught admiring a little too much this past week, Brazilian fan. That apparently was not an AI video, but a lot of the others were.
Before we'll get into the MOU with Iran and people who are now feeling much more emboldened to be the critics of Trump that they were railing against. We'll get to that in a bit. Tulsi Gabbard, I want to dive into that. But Robert, I know that you saw Gad Saad took to Twitter to not lament, but not bemoan. Like, people think he's complaining, but they don't understand the degree of theft that taxation in Canada is, and that the departure tax is by essence. And he took to Twitter to vent about it. Now, I underwent the exit tax as well. I didn't complain because I know that people don't care about people complaining how much tax they have to pay or how much they're getting, fleeced by the government, because A, it's a first world problem. It's sort of a privileged problem to have in the first place. And B, everybody out there who already is dependent on those tax dollars is not going to, they're not going to relate to the pain. And the amount of people on his Twitter timeline, some of whom are employed by Radio-Canada, the state-funded, journalists. I was like, of course you're going to be okay with this. But GADSAT is now discovering the exit tax when you break residence with Canada. And from what I understand, it's the same with the States, but they might even be worse. When you break residence with Canada, there's a deemed disposition of all of your assets. And if you have shares in a corporation, they basically look at that corporation. They say, how much is it worth? Or if it's publicly traded, how much is it worth? And it's as though you sold those shares and then you get taxed on the capital gains on those shares. Where it gets particularly thorny is in privately held, 100% owned private companies, where the valuations are sometimes arbitrary or difficult to establish, and where you don't necessarily have the liquidity because, if you get taxed on your GM shares, they say, oh, it's as though you sold them. Here's your capital gains. You have the choice to sell them and pay the capital gains with the proceeds of the sale. When it comes to private corporations and you own all the shares and the valuation doesn't necessarily reflect what's in the bank, it becomes a little bit more difficult or onerous. And so Gad has discovered it. He's getting some sympathy. I think he's getting some people are, appreciating the degree of which the theft in Canada is systemic, and also people feel entitled to it now. So he's got a pickle. I don't think there's any way to get out of it. It's the price for freedom, so to speak. But some people are saying that the States are even worse, where even if you leave the country, they will tax you in foreign countries so long as you don't renounce your citizenship. And I know that we had talked about it, and I think it came up in the Roger Ver case. But what do you make of what GAD is now discovering as the exit tax in Canada? Also, they do it when you die, just so everybody knows. They tax you in life and they tax you in death. But compared to the U.S., is the U.S. basically equivalent if you decide to break residency?
Not exactly. So the difference between Canada and the U.S. is twofold. First, the Canada, to my knowledge, does not tax you on income you receive outside of Canada. So, and doesn't tax you where you travel to. Like if you live overseas, that they don't tax you on money received over, is my understanding. That it's based on the location of the source of income. That it's not global. I think the U.S. may be one of the only countries in the world that taxes you based on citizenship, not the source of income. So in that respect, U.S. citizens, that's how people like that. Some people that didn't want to be birthright citizens, who only woke up to discover they were birthright citizens when the IRS was like, we want to take 20% or whatever it was under their various FATCA laws, which govern opening up accounts, disclosing those accounts if they're in foreign nations, if they hit a certain valuation and the like. The interesting thing, when I was in the Caribbean, I've had a lot of cases down there over the years. It's 70, at least 50% Canadian or British or Scottish or Irish, because they're all down there because they don't get taxed on their income in the Caribbean. The U.S. is not down there in a meaningful way in providing services because there's no benefit. They're mostly in Puerto Rico. Peter Schiff, Brent Johnson. Why? Because Puerto Rico has special tax laws that allow you to limit your tax impact, but not elsewhere. So that's the first component. The second component is very different.
Let me pause you just on one, just so that nobody misquotes. So Canada taxes on income wherever you make it if you reside in Canada, but when you reside outside of Canada, this is another source of critique.
But would the exit tax apply? So, like, if your investment was in an entity outside of Canada, does it still apply? Like, let's say you had a Cayman company, do you have to pay the exit tax on it if you are leaving your residency?
I think I don't quote me. I think you would. I just know as a matter of fact that if you reside in Canada and you make royalties, in a foreign country for sales in that foreign country, they tax you on it in Canada, regardless of what the tax rate is in that foreign country. It's not the same if you reside outside of Canada. Then it's not the same thing anymore.
The other factor that plays a role here is the treaties. Is Canada signatory to various tax treaties? Because then they have to respect certain things and limits on their taxes.
I don't know that answer offhand. I just know from...
you should have figured it. Should have got some loopholes even before you paid all that tax, so that the commie government could, you waste more of your taxpayer dollars on crazy crap. But so Canada, I obviously am not an expert in Canadian tax laws. I just know there's a lot of Canadians in the Caribbean that aren't paying a lot of tax. That's about all. But on the U.S. side, you got the state level and the federal level. So on the federal level, it taxes you wherever you are. If you're a citizen, you have to pay tax on every penny, nickel, dime, and dollar you made anywhere in the world, no matter where you're located in the world. If you choose that you don't want that to be the case anymore, and you decide you are going to forfeit your U.S. citizenship, they make it perceived, since they didn't used to, but since I want to say maybe the 90s, early 2000s, when a lot of this exploded, a lot of interest of Americans not wanting to be citizens anymore. I mean, not a huge number, but significant from a monetary perspective, as some Americans started to be suspect or skeptical of where America was going. They imposed a so-called exit tax, and that says that when you leave, if you have to go and forfeit your passport at a particular U.S. embassy, and you got to go through this ceremonial process to divorce yourself from the United States. Not every country requires as much details as the U.S. does, just to get the heck out for those that want to. And then as a condition of it, they impose a tax that they pretend is it. Now, here's the second big difference between the federal level and the state level and the U.S. level in most foreign nations. We have a constitutional constraint on what you can tax in the U.S. So happy Father's Day out there. Hopefully the Supreme Court remembers the founding fathers when they do some cases over the next couple of weeks, because a happy Founding Fathers Day would be we should have a separate day for that. We have Declaration of Independence Day and whatnot, but maybe another one we have Constitution Day, which is kind of there, but I would want another one. But there's no such thing as too many holidays celebrating our founding fathers or our Constitution. But the Constitution says you cannot impose a direct tax without apportionment amongst the states. It's impossible to do politically. So what it means is no direct tax is constitutional. The 16th Amendment said if it's a tax on income, it doesn't have to be apportioned. And then the Supreme Court limited what the definition of income is, and this is why Congress has never defined it. If you go to this day, you'll find that the word income isn't in there. The word gross income is in there. The word net income are in there. All kinds of words like that are in there. And then you realize it's like somebody knocked on your door and said, hey, people, you owe the widget tax. And you're like, well, what's a widget? It's all the widgets made from all the other widgets that are the net widgets from the gross widgets. You're like, you still haven't defined widgets. That is exactly what the income tax is. It's a joke under our traditional Anglo-American constitutional principles. If it is not defined with clarity and without ambiguity, who it is that's taxed, who it is that's liable for the tax, and what it is that's taxed, it's supposed to be presumed not taxed. But our federal courts have long abandoned that for the century plus since the income tax 16th Amendment was passed. And so, yeah.
Sorry, I had to bring it up.
That's great. And so the question then is the U.S. income tax, exit tax, constitutional? It really isn't, in my opinion. It's a property tax. What they do is they come up with a legal fiction that pretends that all of your assets have been sold and that you've now made income the moment that you give up citizenship. It's a preposterous claim. And it's nothing more and nothing less and nothing else than an unconstitutional tax that the Supreme Court has never addressed. I don't think a circuit court has ever addressed. Few district courts have ever addressed. I've represented a range of people with exit tax cases. And usually what you do with the IRS is you just raise that you're going to constitutionally challenge it. You lay out the constitutional challenge. And they're very open in the negotiations as to what that amount can be. And that's how people end up parlaying it into not ever getting a constitutional challenge, because they, as an individual taxpayer, get to reduce their amount of tax that could be due under the tax. Now, the states are mostly not limited by this. So California, other states, they generally can impose an exit tax. They're considering both a billionaire tax in California and an exit tax in California. And what was amazing is they're trying to make it retroactive, so that if you were ever a resident of California within maybe 10 years, within maybe 20 years back, suddenly you owe a bunch of taxes to California, simply for once living there, based on a tax that's clearly ex post facto. And whether how those laws will constitutionally work is an open question, because they've threatened to pass such laws, but never have fully passed such laws. So the U.S. exit tax is very similar to how you describe the Canadian exit tax. Yeah. But unlike the Canadian exit tax, it's highly likely that the U.S. exit tax is unconstitutional.
Yeah, and I double checked. It seems that the exit tax includes shares in foreign companies. I think when you notice a lot of Canadians in the Caribbean, and I know this to be a fact also.
Usually it's like 3 or 4 steps removed. They don't own shares in the companies.
Well, people have been, messaging alternative solutions, all of which involve Bitcoin, and that way you can cross the border with it. But I think what a lot of Canadians do is declare residence in some of these places in the Caribbean, and that way the Caribbean doesn't tax on income in foreign countries. It's theft, and the only issue, the biggest issue is also they squander your tax dollars. I mean, Gad put out a funny tweet. It's like, I'm so glad they're using my tax dollars to make gender neutral bathrooms in Lebanon. Like this is what they do with our dollars. Or what's his face goes gallivanting around to watch soccer games. So that's it. Everybody knows if you're going to leave Canada, leave before you acquire wealth or plan in advance. But they would rather make criminals out of the people that leave and make examples out of them. So like there's no way for people said, Viva, just buy Bitcoin and then have it be an investment. They've got it all down there. They would rather make criminals of the prominent names fleeing the country to scare other people. You pay for freedom, and then you bite the bullet and you live with the beautiful smell of freedom.
Where do people get all these photos of you? Mr. Mike's got a funny meme, but you kind of look like the serial killer from Twin Peaks. the eye.
Hold up. You had me at serial killer from Twin Peaks. Bringing this up. Hold on. I'm still on the confession. Escape. Hold up here. Down to the bottom.
Yeah. See that? The way the eyes are, the nail get through you. You know what I mean? It's got the intensity.
Well, the funny thing is that picture is real. That's all
authentic. Your wife looked like she just got out of The Shining.
It was just cold that night. That was the restaurant my parents loved to go for dinner. Okay, we're going to get to the rest.
So you weren't going, here's Johnny into the bathroom or anything like this on this vacation?
It's a good picture. I like the memes. All right, Robert. Let's start off with the biggest news of the week: the memorandum of understanding. I don't know, is the deal off yet, or is it still on the books? Trump seemingly came to an agreement with Iran, the terms of which pissed off the likes of Laura Loomer. I mean, basically, I don't need to name names. Laura Loomer, Mark Levin, and anybody who is arguably, but not arguably, Israel first. And I'm not saying that in any mean, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel way. There are people out there who are self-avowed supporters of Israel, and that's fine. Except when that priority trumps your loyalty to your own country. And I know everybody says, well, what's in Israel's best interest is in America's best interest. Save that argument for later. These are people who are proud to say they are Zionists, whatever that means, support Israel in all that it does. And so you can select a half dozen people who were going to be pissed and who now feel empowered to express their discontent with Trump because they don't like the terms of this agreement, not for America, but for Israel, although they cloak that explanation in, well, if it's bad for Israel, it's bad for America, and I don't like it for America either, but I don't like it for Israel. 12 points of the agreement. I went over them on Friday. I wanted to upload them to the internet, but the internet's so bad I couldn't even get the clip up. But the biggest ones of this agreement, as far as I understand, are $300 billion in reconstruction. That's not supposed to come from America, but that is, in theory, going to be offered or procured by way of, in-kind reconstruction of Iran. There was also the unfreezing of a lot of assets, and the argument, again, is America's not giving them any money, Iran that is, but this is going to come from unfreezing assets that were wrongly seized and reconstruction costs that are going to be contributed to by the neighboring Gulf nations. They're going to end the hostilities. The uranium, they're going to figure out what to do with the enriched uranium. Allegedly, they are no longer going to pursue any form of nuclear weapons program. And what JD said in his speech or his address to the nation, which makes sense. We're not at the point where we were in 2016, where they have a fully functional nuclear weapons program, unless we're being fed disinformation from the government. It's been obliterated. 4 months of continued obliteration. There hasn't been regime change for whatever the reason, and there hasn't been uprising of the people taking over. So set that aside. All of this comes now at a time when they no longer have a nuclear weapons program, so they can't just start from 2016 levels. I'm inclined only to, address the agreement by virtue of the way that people who I disagree with are reacting to it. And so when some people are vitriolically angry at the deal and now turning that vitriol to the president, I'm inclined to think, okay, well, it's a good deal in the sense that just get back to domestic issues, get back to lowering the cost of living for Americans in time for November. What's your take? What's your prediction? And what do you make of those who now feel wholly empowered to criticize Trump?
Yeah, so I mean, the deal that was on the table before this war started in February and last year was a much better deal. So people that point that out are pointing it out correctly. The critics of the war had long laid out that even if you supported it for legal or political reasons, thought it was good, that you were less likely to achieve the purported objectives through kinetic conflict than you were negotiated outcome due to the nature of the Iranian regime and its capacity to engage in asymmetric warfare, particularly economic coercive tools through exerting control over the Strait of Hormuz. So the deal that's on the table now is a variation of the deal that was done in early April, that Vice President Vance, as now everybody can see, there's all these allegations by people saying, oh, Vance was secretly for the war and all this jazz, and this is all a Peter Thiel conspiracy for Vance to take over. There's that kind of folks out there that just because they were right about criticizing Israel, suddenly people think that they're prescient, when really their anti-Semitism stumbled into it. Some of these cases, to be blunt about it. There are some of these people that were rightly critical, the Tucker Carlsons, the Alex Jones of the world. There are others whose criticism I'm still suspect and skeptical of, like Nick Fuentes and Kuki Candace, in terms of their motivation. You think Stalin is a Jew, and all the rest, and you think Joe Kent's secretly part of the CIA, working for the deep state, then I don't take you seriously. I don't care how many people watch it. So Vance gets the deal in early April, and that deal was not as beneficial to Iran as the current deal is, and that's because Trump rug pulled. And Vance would get another. Each time Trump would rug pull the deal, Iran would come back and say it's like Trump with the border wall. Remember, it's like, oh, it just got 2 feet higher, it just got 4 feet higher. Anytime there was criticism, well, that's what Iran did. Well, it just got $2 more, it just got $4 more, except the dollars are in billions. And they kept escalating and escalating. They were going to punish Trump for thinking he could use kinetic conflict and threats to achieve deference from Iran. That was their strategy all the way through. It's also come out that they have adopted one of the arguments my interpretive explanations that I was making. They decided that they thought Trump was suffering some form of emotional or mental health impairment. And that because of that, they went and brought in a bunch of shrinks to say, how should we negotiate and communicate and interpret his actions and reactions? That actually improved things because it gave Vance a little more cover whenever Trump went off the rails. Say, just ignore Trump. It is what it is. Let's focus. I can get it there. I can get this across the finish line. And why was Vance so motivated? He was so motivated for 2 reasons. One, he sees that the economic cliff that the president himself admitted this week we were on the precipice of. He said within a month, he was going to end up like J. Edgar Hoover, meaning global depression, not deep recession, global depression. And he decided he didn't want to be J. Edgar Hoover, and so he signed the deal. But that's what Vance recognized from the very inception. He recognized this this is why he lobbied so heavily against the war, took a lot of crap for doing so. He saw it coming, and he was right. His advisors are right. And now you can see in Islamabad, when the negotiating team is there, I mean, Kushner and Wickoff are kind of, they're there as like decorations, to be blunt. The key people are Vance and his entire team. It's his chief of staff. It's his national security advisor. It's his foreign policy advisor. It's his team that's all there. They're the ones that got this done. It's damning of Rubio that Rubio's not there. It's damning of Rubio that no one from the State Department is there. It's damning of Hegseth that the Defense Department is there. Now, there are other people in the Defense Department that would be happy to help, like Undersecretary Elbridge Colby and his chief deputy, who also warned everything was going to happen. That did ultimately happen. Recognizing the economic risk. The second reason is geopolitical risk. That if this gets out of control, as Vance hit the whole podcast circuit explaining, we do not want Iran to fall apart and collapse because that will be a nightmare for America. We do not want continuous conflict in the Middle East because that will be a nightmare for America. That if we can get Iran we can shift the whole U.S.-Iran axis from one of confrontation to one of conciliation, That will be good for Iran, good for America, good for the Middle East, good for the world, good for the economy, good for geopolitical security. And he has gone to great lengths and suffered a lot of political arrows and the like, was being spied upon by Israel at elevated levels, the Defense Intelligence Agency disclosed and detailed. He finally gets the president who did not want to go to Versailles and the G7 without a deal, did not want the World Cup going full throttle with the war in the backdrop, and knew, as the oil execs went to him and told him 2 weeks ago, we were off a cliff in about 4 weeks. And so the president, he's now publicly acknowledged almost everything I'm talking about. He also recognized, you saw him adopt all of Vance's arguments. He was like, how is it we tell Iran not to have missiles when everybody around them has missiles? How do we tell? He goes, people are like, well, what about the money? He goes, well, you realize it's actually their money. We probably can't hold it forever, can we? So, and is it really a good idea? This was old Trump. This was pre-war Trump. Is it a good idea to engage in too much sanctions when what that really does is discourage the use of the U.S. dollar and the U.S. financial system and investment in the U.S. economy? Is that really such a smart idea? This is the Trump that I knew for a decade plus until the last 3 months. So like, wow, Trump is back. And so however he got there, however Vance got him there, it was a mini miracle. And so Vance goes over to Islamabad. The fundamentals of the deal is a big investment, $300 billion. A good portion of that is money that's Iranian money that we have.
If I can just add one thing, some people are suggesting that it will be not related parties, but it will be Halliburton-esque in terms of who gets the rebuilding contracts.
That's probably the case. Unfortunately, I think Witkoff and Kushner may be there to make sure certain people get their share. I mean, that's the mob style part that's still vestigially a part of this administration, unfortunately.
Well, all steel men, at least make sure it's reconstructed properly. Yeah. I don't know what the Halliburton quality was, but Trump Towers are nice. So
yeah, exactly. Hopefully, but it'll be like, hey, we need so much for this family. This family's got to get 10% over here. This family's got to get 5% over here. It's very like that. But that's not Vance's priority. That's just Witkoff and Kushner hanging out to try to make sure the Trump donor class gets their share. But this has been Dr. Parsi's argument all the way through. He's like, look, the best way to reform Iran, the best way to help the U.S., the best way to stabilize the Middle East is a bifurcated approach. One, to contain Israel when they go outside their box and lose their minds for a while, as Ronald Reagan did in 1983, when he withdrew our forces from Lebanon and told the Israel to step down and back off and get back into a box. And he was willing to call it a Holocaust, which at that time was even more controversial. Reagan using that kind of language, telling an Israeli leader, you're engaged in a Holocaust. That, you don't hear that very often. And that was, just 40 years removed from the Holocaust that gave it its most infamous name. And so and this Parsi's argument was they economically invest. If you start to economically invest, and the one that sanctions don't work, just punishes poor people. It actually empowers the regime. It doesn't limit the regime, because increasingly you need political class. This is my argument long term against sanctions. All sanctions do is prop up a regime. They don't hurt a regime. They hurt the people of the country, but they don't hurt the regime. And the reason is it gives them power to sort of parasitically control access to resources, right? If you're a sanctioned country, then you've got to have connections and know-how. It's not what you know, it's who you know, in order to be able to survive, in order to be able to thrive. That empowers the parasitic elites of the political class in that regime. It doesn't disempower them. Look at Cuba for 60 plus years. Yeah, you can impoverish the ordinary person in that country, but that's not going to lead to revolution. Instead, you make it so that if you want to survive, you got to be friends with somebody in the political class. So Dr. Parsi has long argued this is an ineffective strategy, particularly as it relates to Iran, and that if you get U.S. investment back in and boost the Iranian working and middle class and create less antagonism and hostility between the cultures and civilizations, you'll actually reduce the radicalism of the regime and return to the Persian moderation that is its long-standing civilizational and cultural history and legacy. And Vance increasingly recognized the wisdom of Dr. Parsi's argument, particularly as he saw the debacle that this war was creating, and tried to get a deal done of This remember he pitched this all the way back when he was in Georgia at the Turning Point event, where he said, "Look, we can make Iran rich again, and in the process make America great again." He was already front running the criticism of releasing the sanctioned money. I didn't think Trump would ever have the courage to accept that part of a deal, but then he did. He himself said, "Hey, really, their money, you know." So and what it is they've created these fanciful structures so that like we'll release money to some other country that will then release money to Iran, that kind of thing. But Vance understands the more deeply we're directly invested in there, the better for us, the better for Iran. If it's done correctly. And so the core of the deal is the strait gets opened, our blockade ends, the strait gets opened, the frozen funds of Iran go back to Iran. There is a sufficient and substantial investment fund. If it's sufficient enough, there may be no fee being charged in the Straits of Hormuz. Iran may still control it in terms of the traffic in and out and require permits and licenses, but may make the fees de minimis in that respect. And what that does, it allows the economy to start to breathe again. It avoids, first and foremost, falling off a cliff. We're still going to suffer, and we're still going to have some cascading negative effects over the next 6 months to a year from all of this oil and gas and fertilizer and helium being taken offline. And there's some aspects of Qatari's natural gas and damage to facilities that's not going to come back super quick. And even if they reopen the Strait of Hormuz and said so, insurance companies and others are going to be reluctant and a little slow to just jump back in. So all of this will hurt the economy, but it won't destroy the economy if we're able to get this deal through and geopolitically make sense. The last and critical constituent component of the deal, aside from Iran willing to not develop nuclear weapons, and that's always been their position, but that became more of a risk because of the fact that the supreme leader who issued the fatwa was now dead, and Shia religion allows modifications of those kind of fatwas under a situational circumstance. So restoring that balance and not getting into a nuclear arms race in the Mideast would be a very good idea. That's a critical constituent component of this, and the biggest selling point that Vance would make publicly in a court of public opinion. And as long as he can keep Trump focused. And then the last piece, the thorniest piece, it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. But it is Israel constantly bombing Iran. And here again, Lebanon.
Lebanon, okay.
Yeah, exactly. And here, Trump finally put in straightforward language. To credit first to Vice President Vance, who is pointing out Israel's just an ally. They're not a special ally. There is no special allegiance. There is no special alliance. Dershowitz and Huckabee and those folks are off the res. That is not who, we don't, our George Washington and founding Father's Day version of Father's Day laid out in his farewell address, do not develop special friendships. They're more dangerous than special enemies. And that's what Vance is doing. We've got to treat Israel like any regular ally. We've got to recognize Israel sometimes is not allied with our interests. We have to recognize that sometimes they're adversarial to our interests. We have to recognize that we need to contain Israel to keep peace in the Middle East and protect American security and prosperity. And then President Trump picked up on the same thing and put it in beautiful Trumpian language. This was old school Trump. He goes, what? Some little drone drops in the desert and Bibi's got to bomb another apartment complex? He goes, what is that? I was like, perfect. That is exactly the problem. And it was great. It was beautiful to see Trump put it in such distilled, obvious language. There's no reason for this. And contrary to the assumption, a lot of people that claim to be Israel first, the Mark Levins, Laura Loomers, et cetera, or to promote and protect Israel, that's increasingly not the opinion in Israel. Right now in the prediction markets, Bibi is set to lose. And it's not just because of the Iran war, it's also how he's handled this with Trump and continued to escalate in Lebanon. And now increasingly in the prediction markets and the polls, the leading future candidate for the prime minister of Israel is someone who wants to restore Israel staying within its borders, which has been Gurion. I always get the name wrong, but one of the founders of Israel said we're too small. We have to stay within our borders. Can't be going out grabbing things everywhere. Bibi wants to go out and grab everything everywhere. And that other lunatic, Ben Gvir, that guy just can't. They just got to gag him. They got to put him in one of those torture prisons they stick all the Palestinians in.
just so everybody understands who Ben Gvir is, he's the Minister of Defense, if I'm not mistaken, on his position. I went over
National Security Minister.
He put out a tweet that literally said all of Lebanon must burn. For every tear of an Israeli mother, there should be 1,000 sobbing Lebanese mothers. And I had this discussion with people who are very much, I'm not anti-Israel. In fact, I'll say I might be even more pro-Israel than someone who says they're pro-Israel, because that type of tweet puts everyone at risk. And the rationale is almost like the more batshit crazy some of these Israeli politicians get, the more Jews throughout the world have to get on board with it, because the more the reaction is going to be bad against all Jews as a result of a tweet that violated X's terms of service. It was actually, it said it was violated it, but that they're leaving it up in the name of, public interest. So the reality is, for those who say I support Israel, if they act in a way that effectively exacerbates global anti-Semitism, if the argument is, well, other Jews had better get behind us now because the reaction from what we're doing is going to be even worse, what they're doing in Lebanon is enough to actually draw the ire of Trump now. And at some point, it goes a little bit beyond defending yourself. If the idea is, well, we've got a minister of defense saying all of Lebanon has to burn, that doesn't sound like defense anymore. That sounds like something much worse.
Yeah, and you even hear Netanyahu saying it's okay if we kill one citizen per 5 terrorists. And we already know how generous Bibi is with his definition, expansive with his definition of terrorist are. It's like no one should be out there saying this. It's just, it showed, like Bill Ackman was like, I don't understand. And he went on this long thing. I was like, that describes Bill Ackman in sum. I don't understand. Though I do love the way Tucker needles him all the time. He goes, nothing shows you that there's a problem with the American economy than people as stupid as Bill Ackman are billionaires. Because Bill Ackman, Bill Ackman wanted to give Charlie a special re-education camp out there in the Hamptons. When Charlie was pointing out the same things that Trump did this past week and Vance did this past week. So now the X factor, God bless him, is Donald John Trump. So at any given moment, I wish they really, I'll get in more trouble, but I really wish they would gag him at times. Because Trump, that when he's off his meds, which they should put someone on, here it is. Vance is going there. Islamabad. They're going to have a signature. They're going to have a signing. They're going to go forward with more negotiations. Going to get everything good. And Trump's like, maybe he'll murder all of them on their way back home. And maybe he'll blow up Iran and destroy it forever again. And it's like, there was no need for this. There's no need. The clause 1 of the Memorandum of Understanding, no more threats during this 60-day period. Trump violates Article 1 of the Memorandum of Understanding less than a week after he signed it. He now and then goes back to this idea that threats and kinetic conflict will get him something. It gets him in a worse position with Iran. They've proven this again and again and again. This ain't Venezuela. This ain't even Cuba. This is Iran. This is the Persians.
This is M. Sidloy, who's usually on point, sincere person, says Ben Gvir isn't the defense minister. He was purposely kept out of the war cabinet. But hold up. Ben Gvir's position is Minister of National Security in the Israeli government. In this cabinet position, he oversees the country's police force, the Israel prison service, and the national security and national security matters. He's also the leader of the
so he has a role, but he's not the lead actor in those roles. But the problem is, you have heard from enough Israelis. They're increasingly a minority. They became a big majority after October 7th. And increasingly, them watching the Iran war go completely sideways has led to more like Alastair Crook. I think it's Conflicts Forum on Substack, former British intel officer. He has been involved in mediating disputes with Israel and other countries going back to the 90s, I think. His wife follows the Hebrew press because it's extraordinary. The disparity between what Bibi says in Hebrew or what he says in English is really something. Problem is, in the modern age of X, like the Ben Gvir tweet, originally written in Hebrew, but they automatically translate on X.
That is why I unsarcastically asked if the translation was accurate, and I got a reasonable answer that it's fairly accurate from those who are
well. Then Ben Gvir went on local Israeli TV and made it clear he would like to take over all of Lebanon, and he doesn't care about anybody, and that there's no innocent in Lebanese. That is the sentiment. And then some high-ranking British guy, Kim, for the love of God, can somebody advise the Israeli cause, related cause. Can we not have like 55 different Jewish conventions? If you want to, I mean, it's like this is like the Jewish News Convention or something. I didn't even know these things existed, like Republicans and Conference, Jewish World Congress, and it's like, good Lord, have mercy. And this British guy goes and says, "I'm just a little goy." Happy was like, I mean, do you people not understand PR at all? How you're saying all the wrong things, doing all the. Barris and I have been warning about this for a year to our friends on the Israeli cause, on the Israeli side. And like Barris did polling data for him, and their conclusion was, "Oh, we need to buy TikTok and more of the media." Like, no, that wasn't the point. The point was you need to adjust your strategies. This goes all the way back to the beginning. Whenever Israel is perceived as exceeding reasoned boundaries, when it's seen as the aggressor and not the victim, it loses in the court of public opinion in the United States. It always has. Gaza was bad enough. Now you add Lebanon and Iran to the equation? Then God bless Trump. Trump saying, "Hey, I want to unleash Mr. Head Chopper from Syria on Lebanon." There's a good way to discourage people.
Well,
I mean,
that was unfortunately, one of the more potentially legitimate criticisms coming from those who are saying this deal is bad for America, bad for Israel. Let me bring this up here.
Funny is hearing that from Israelis, because so many of these pro-Israeli folks, these Israel first folks, they promoted that change and getting rid of Assad in Syria and promoted this guy. And then they're like, hold on, Trump is saying he's going to let Al-Qaeda defend us? Yeah, who helped put Al-Qaeda in charge there? Wasn't just the U.S. It was Bibi Netanyahu. And maybe that was not such a bright idea as he gets into it. But if you look at it, the third candidate that's surging above both Netanyahu and Naftali Bennett is up there is saying we need to get back into our borders. So what you're seeing is sentiment in Israel is shifting. And they're like, hold on a second, this has got out of hand. This isn't working the way we thought it was going to work. There's enough time distance between October 7th and now, and I think more people are asking some questions even in Israel about what the heck actually happened on October 7th, because they haven't got answers satisfactory in Israel on those questions. For many,
I'm not bringing it up with affirmation. There is indication there are people who are even on the side of Netanyahu who say we have not yet had a satisfactory explanation for how it happened, at the scale that it happened, for the duration that it happened, and 3 years out. And it's not to say nothing will minimize the atrocity. The analogy is if you live next to criminals or you live next to pedophiles, you don't leave your children unattended on the front lawn. And if you live next to dogs, you don't leave your fence open. And the explanation that they relied on high tech and let low tech dominate doesn't really satisfy any rational critical thought. But set all that aside, to the extent some people said at the time, this is going to be used as a pretext to now raise all of Gaza, create a much needed buffer zone. That was the key bono from the atrocity that some people were saying this, looks and smells like something much more sinister. And whether, you believe it or not, if it's being used as that to raise all of the neighboring countries, at some point, you either achieve your mission or you don't. And if you don't achieve it after 3 years, you have to ask yourself what the mission is at that point.
Yeah, and I think Bibi has played his cards the wrong way, because if he loses the upcoming elections, assuming everybody pretty much assumes they'll happen in October, early November,
he goes to jail.
Exactly. He's going to lose that verdict, and he's going to be in prison for 3 to 4 years in Israel. So along with his wife. So is that where he wanted in his political career? He should be playing ball with Trump. Should be facilitating and enabling this deal, because he's the one who lied to Trump to sucker and snooker Trump into this. Now, it's amazing. You're seeing these new books come out detailing some of the stuff that I've been talking about. People said we were nuts for saying. It's now all out there that Trump never trusted Bibi. Trump never trusted the more crazy part of Israel. He said some of these people are just nuts, that he was deeply skeptical of the war a year ago. Something totally flipped by whatever that explanation is. Maybe we'll find out. But hopefully JD can still get this across the line and keep Papa Trump from going cray-cray before now and the end of July 4th. I know
Robert,
Trump doesn't want the war to be going on during that.
You're back to being a Zionist, Robert. is Barnes trying to cover for the Israelis? Sounds like it.
You're sounding a little goy, Barnes. You're sounding a little goy. I've had the same geopolitical realist principles throughout my whole life. Skeptical of war, critical of dumb politics that undermine the well-being. And from an American perspective, I'm anti-empire. because our founders believed empire will destroy a constitutional republic quicker than anything. But I think JD is going to deliver. I'll tell you this: if JD gets this through the line, but for JD's presence in the White House, this I don't think ever gets done. I think we're stuck in this as a forever war for 3 years. Because I think only Rubio wasn't willing to step up, Ratcliffe wasn't willing to step up, Hegseth wasn't willing to step up, Kane wasn't willing to step up, Wright wasn't willing to step up, Soros Scotty wasn't willing to step up, Narco Marco wasn't willing to step up, Swampy Susie wasn't willing to step up. The only person willing to step up was JD Vance. But he has stepped up in a big, big, big way. And if he can get this through, it would be a great achievement for the world to avoid the disaster that would otherwise occur, but also maybe put us on a whole different path in the Middle East, where we have a majorly reduced footprint. Israel restores to a within its borders focal point. We get the Iran problem, the Iran conflict done forever, or at least done for the foreseeable future. And all of that would be good for peace, good for prosperity, good for America. And the only reason why it's even possible is thanks to Vice President Vance, who deserves more credit than anybody will ever know he warrants, especially if he can get this across the finish line.
Well, Robert, Vag Mangina says, "Viva, you're full of shit." If you're going to do it,
hold on a second. I think he's giving you away. Giving away who he is with that title.
Well, I mean, at least if you're going to say, "Viva, you're so full of shit," your eyes are turning brown. That's the funny way to phrase it. All right, no,
but the dude is named Vag Man, so take it what it's worth.
No, it's Vag Mangina because he's got a mangina.
Of course.
All right. Well, on one issue of international politics, moving to the other, which is Tulsi Gabbard dropping some bombs, metaphorically speaking, on her way out. What's amazing is when she came out with the biolabs and the gain of function research in labs in Ukraine and elsewhere, that prior administrations, and I put it in quotes, on the one hand, she's throwing other administrations under the bus while simultaneously protecting this administration, who I doubt Trump would knowingly be engaging in gain of function research or ratifying it if it's going on.
Well, he actually said no to it when he came in because Obama had put it in. He said, no, we got to end this right. He reinforced what Obama started in 2014. And right away in early 2025, one of his first key orders was no gain of function work at all. Period. End of story. No funding for it, no organizing for it, no supporting it, no subsidizing it, no backing it. And he gave Tulsi Gabbard full authority, investigate to see what the heck's been happening. And that was one of her key points, is one of the key people Fauci was intent on deceiving in 2020 was President Trump.
And so she dropped that bomb a couple of weeks ago. Then people go back to calling her a mouthpiece for Putin because to disclose the fact that there are bioweapons research facilities in Ukraine benefits Putin because Putin was saying, you guys are doing bad stuff in Ukraine. She followed it up with a report indicating that Fauci was involved in gain of function research, involved in misdirecting the scientific community, involved in working with the intelligence community to deceive the general public and conceal what they're doing from the elected government. And I haven't gone through the documents yet. I know Brianna Morello, the journalist, formerly, I think, with Fox, and she's awesome. She's with InfoWars now. She's going through it, and I suspect everybody's going to go through this with AI and whatnot. The bottom line is Fauci was a deliberate, willful player in all of this, in gain of function research, in knowing the origins of COVID, in lying about it, in demonizing and waging campaigns against scientists who did expose it. And basically, she's inviting, I don't know how you can now go after Fauci, given his auto pen pardon, but it's an invitation to go after Fauci. We'll see what smoking gun documentation comes out of what she drops by way of new information, but it's nothing that we didn't all already know. And the only question is, what's going to come of it? Are they going to write this off as more, propaganda from Tulsi before she leaves, or is the new DOJ under the watch of I was going to say Blanche Dubois, Todd Blanche? Are they going to actually do anything about this? Because I don't know what they've done with any of the prior referrals that she has handed over to the DOJ.
Well, first, great work to Tulsi Gabbard, who delivered on the promises that she was able to deliver on. There were some things like the Iran war and Maduro's kidnapping and the rest that she did not have control over. But what she had control over is what intelligence she provided to the president, and she gave him honest intel on all of that. But as important was reforming the deep state by exposing the deep state. And she got more of the Kennedy files out than in the Robert Kennedy assassination files out than anyone else had before. More of the John Kennedy assassination files out than anyone else had before. More information on the Martin Luther King assassination files than anyone else had before. And more information on the biolabs in general, and U.S. complicity in those bioweapons labs across the country, around the world, than anyone else before. And now fingered one of the key culprits of the corrupt actors within the deep state. And this just happens to involve the public health apparatus of the deep state, which is Anthony Fauci. It's no coincidence that Robert Kennedy personally and publicly thanked her for her work, since Kennedy's famous book about Anthony Fauci fully exposed what a bum he is. It reminds me, I got to pass along. Robert Kennedy asked me to pass along some good words about the good warder Mendenhall, whose funeral was held last week. So first credit to Gabbard for the excellent work she was able to do, and the fact that they pushed her out. Some people that pushed her out, wanted her out, didn't want this report to come out. This was part of their goal as to why they pushed her out. She wanted until the end of the year so she could get all these reports fully developed. She still got them out. So credit to her for making sure this got done. Is part one. Part two is, what is it about? So back in World War I and World War II even worse, Japanese and the Germans particularly, but not limited to them, were doing massive research into various forms of, whether it's eugenics, whether it's experimentation, but a big part of it was bioweapons research. And ultimately, by the early 1980s, Professor, I think Francis Boyle, I think he may have passed away, but he used to be at the University of Illinois, who identified what COVID was from day one. Right away, he said, this is a bioweapon. It was why Alex Jones was so convinced. He said it was absolutely a buy, because I didn't buy it right away. I didn't believe that right away. But he's like, no, Dr. Boyle's the best in the city. He helped get the convention against bioweapons passed that the United States and most of the world is a signatory to. And what this requires is no research into developing biological tools to be weaponized against anyone. And there's a phrase for that. It's called gain of function. And what is gain of function? You take something that's a potential biological agent and you give it a gain so that it either becomes more infectious, more lethal, more able to get to humans or between humans or go from species to humans. You do something to make it more impactful. And gain of function is, to me, always illegal. But they've got away with it by saying, well, we're really developing this gain of function because our enemy might be developing the exact same gain of function. And because of that, we need to figure out what the defenses would be to this new gain of function, just in case our enemy is doing so. All BS. The idea that your enemy is working on the exact same project you're working on, I don't think so. So, and nor is it developing defenses their primary goal in these things. They almost never do develop the successful or effective defenses, as COVID was the ultimate proof of. So this becomes I forget what triggered it, but 2012, 2013, it pops up on the public radar that the U.S. is back to doing this. I think they're called, they're literally, I think, BS. So it's like BS level, whatever. I always found that funny. But that basically, and the key culprit involved in it is Anthony Fauci, that Obama figures out. And Obama's like, we got to put an end to this. This has been illegal. Yeah, sure, no problem. And then what Fauci spends the next half decade doing is still funding it, but pretending it's a grant to a U.S. agency to develop it in a foreign country, and pretending he has plausible deniability about what it is. This is where Peter Daszak and others get involved, and EcoHealth and that route involved. And so what people didn't understand is it wasn't just the China virus, as Trump called it. It was, as China, remember, put this out early when they were defensive, and then they pulled it back. Remember, they said this came from the U.S. What they were trying to suggest maybe didn't come from the China at all. That was not true. But there was a kernel of truth to it. It was the U.S.-funded bioweapons research in Wuhan that was heavily funded, as the Tulsi Gabbard details the whole money trail to develop this. That's exactly what they were working on. It was bat-adjusted coronaviruses to make them more infectious and make them more lethal. That he was the one doing it. He was doing it against international law. He was doing it against our treaties, which is the highest law of the land in the United States, along with the Constitution, and right underneath the Constitution. And he was doing it in violation of federal statutes and executive orders telling him, don't do this. And so what happens when the cat gets out of the bag or the bat gets out of the cage? He goes to the greatest cover-up effort maybe in American history outside of the Kennedy and King assassinations. Because he not only first starts planning the story that, oh, this was all natural. That's part one. Part two, he infiltrates the intelligence apparatus and all the intelligence agencies, saying he's the premier expert on this, saying here's the narrative. The narrative is this was totally natural, had nothing to do with any kind of research of any kind of anybody at any time at any place. Then the next thing he does is he launches an intimidation campaign. That was the fact, that part of Tulsi's report, really, I was like, wow, wowzers. Look at what Biden, no wonder Biden signed that pardon for Fauci. Because they were going around telling everybody in any level of governmental power, anybody who received a government contract that was onto this, you should remember your opinion on this will be taken into consideration as it deviates from the official report for your future prospects of employment. So it was an intimidation campaign, a coercion campaign, but it didn't stop there. Then they went to the fourth level, which was blacklisting scholarship, getting peer-reviewed articles removed from publications, putting in knowingly false publications into peer-reviewed institutions and publications, and then mass censorship, targeting Robert Kennedy, but not only Robert Kennedy, at suppressing any awareness of this, any conversation of this, when they knew all along they were the ones that caused the mass death and disability of millions and millions of people. And then turn around and promote a vaccine that doesn't work, that was applied in a discriminatory way against people's religious and medical rights and bodily autonomy concerns, that then, and for those that end up getting stuck with it, they ended up with suffering a disparate rate of disability and death. Or if they didn't get stuck with it, they often lost their jobs, lost their employment, lost access to schools, lost all kinds of other things. So it is one of the great crimes against humanity in American history. And I had a bunch of invites over the weekend to be on like Romanian TV, Russian TV, Middle East TV. I thought, maybe they want to discuss the MOU. They're like, no, we want to discuss this because of my prior involvement with Robert Kennedy and going after everything related to this from the get-go. And so, I did a deep dive into the Fauci file created by Tulsi Gabbard. And when you combine it with Robert Kennedy's book, you have a Nazi-level genocidal criminal on your hands who engaged in extensive, expansive cover-up. And in my view, as I was pointing out earlier today on one of these international TV stations, pointing out, it's like, your country can indict Anthony Fauci. As I've been warning some people in the Trump administration, be careful about some of this corruption, because remember, pardons only extend to the United States. They don't extend everywhere. Well, what better person to apply that to than Anthony Fauci? Let's extradite Anthony Fauci. Let's find some country, a whole bunch of countries should indict him, and we should extradite him, send him there. Maybe we can add it in as a footnote to the Iranian MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, send him right to Tehran, let him enjoy those Iranian prisons, someplace like that. And the other follow-up, what the U.S. can do, because legally it's tough to get around the pardon because of how broad the Fauci pardon was. Notice, though, Fauci was pardoned. Not all these other people on these email lists, not all these other people that were complicit in this behavior, all of them could be indicted, and then Fauci could be the unindicted co-conspirator to get this and get some responsibility and accountability within the whole deep state apparatus, using Fauci as the linchpin to all of these other people because he's the one who brought him in and they were willing and knowing complicit compatriots in his criminality. But I think independent of a foreign nation indicting and us extraditing, the other thing is, as I've long called for, a COVID reconciliation commission chaired by Robert Kennedy that gets to full accountability. How did this happen? Why did this happen? What can we do legislatively and executive policy to stop it from happening again? And as part of that, subpoena Anthony Fauci to admit and confess in public under oath all the crimes he committed. And if he lies about a single one of them, then you can indict him for perjury.
Make it happen, people. Let me bring up I want to not lose the super rant. What are these called? Super chats over on CommieTube. Why is Barnes wearing a tam? He answered that question, and it's a damn good hat. Nate, the lawyer in the house. Nate, hope everything's going well. Oh my God, you're calling this a win? No, I don't think it. No, I don't think so. Iran gets 300 billion funds, 10 billion unfrozen. No, I don't think anybody called it a win. I think Barnes actually said specifically
it's a win given the consequences of the alternative. Does it make the war a win? No, the war was already lost. The war has long been lost. The question is whether we can avoid the war becoming a nightmare, dystopian disaster for the American society, economy, and global peace and prosperity. That's the question.
And if nobody knows the original meme, you won't get this one, but changes Department of Defense to Department of War, immediately loses a war. Just get back to basics, I think, is the point on that. And then there was one more CommiTube one before we get onto the next subject. Where was it? It was here. It's this thing right here, which says, can Fauci be put in front of an international court?
There is no international court other than the International Criminal Court, to which we are not a signatory. But what I favor, I'm not a big fan of international courts. Nuremberg Court was really actually controlled by the Allies. It wasn't quite an international court. As international legal standards applicable to all people everywhere, as just Kogan's principles and precepts. Unfortunately, U.S. courts have refused to enforce it in U.S. courts, even though U.S. courts created it in the first place to apply to the Germans and the Italians and the Japanese. Now, what people don't know, a lot of this bioweapon and other research started when we brought a lot of the Nazis and particularly Japanese into the U.S. system back after World War II. That's where MK Ultra got its origin. Yep. Unknown. I think it's Operation Bluebird, if I recall right, back at the end of World War II, where it all started.
Bluebird. I think was Bluebird the alien one. Paperclip was getting the Nazis out.
Paperclip is the second part. It's getting the Nazis out, but it's Bluebird or something like that. Was the predecessor to MK Ultra. But Operation Paperclip was part of all that. It would be great. We need accountability, not only for the satisfaction of the American people, sense of moral justice, but also just to not let this happen again, or to reduce the risk of it happening again. That's why we've got to take corrective action. And I think a reconciliation commission would be good for that, which again could put Fauci into a perjury trap because of the pardon, he can't take the fifth. So he has to answer. So either he confesses publicly for the world to watch, and I think there's value to public confession. That by itself would have you. Imagine Fauci admitting, yeah, I did that. Yeah, I lied. Yeah, I did that. Yeah, I made that up. Yeah, I cooked that up. Yeah, I intimidated those people. His ego is too big to do it. He will get up there and lie because that is in his nature.
It was Bluebeam. I got confused with Bluebird.
Yes.
Ginger Ninja says, Robert, are you going to talk about Bill Poult? Why is it always I didn't know of any accusations of sexual...
I was unaware of this, Ginger Ninja.
I'm going to go look it up. Apparently, the guy gifted a dildo as an award in front of... I'll check that in a second.
That would be a little... Ginger. I would agree with you, Ginger. That would be a little weird. But
Cultivated
Bill Poult, you remember, was the super genius. Apparently, he unfollowed me after I pointed out it wasn't so smart to suggest 50-year mortgages just because Bill Pulte's pals could pocket. Right around then, apparently he had unfollow on the X. A lot of other people have accused of things that keep following me. It's like, oh, okay.
Cultivated Mind says Barnes loves big brown cigars. Dude, I'm not getting in trouble here. Why are you smoking? What are you smoking, brother? That thing is a monster.
I don't know what it is, but I got it because it was so huge. I like those big cigars. Have you ever seen those? There's one in Miami that's it's this big or something. It goes 10 feet.
No, King of Biltong says Cultivated Mind sounds like Dominion After Dark. Bucklebrush Jones says Japanese soccer fans are cleaning our stadiums. I like the respect. Too soon, Bucklebrush. King of Biltong says fuel your day with dried sausage from Biltong USA. Clean ingredients, serious protein. Hold on, I'm gonna cough. By the way, they are great for road trips. Biltong. I went through 2 bags as we're driving. It's amazing. Perfect for road trips.
I wonder if we can come up with some special Biltong for the 1776 Law Center Conference, which is only about a little more than a month away. We're about 5-6 weeks away. They only got a few tickets left. So if you want them, you can go to 1776lawcenter.com and still get tickets. But when we're done, we're done. Cap is a cap. Dr. Bowden is going to be coming. Brooke Jackson is going to be coming. Joe Kent is going to be coming, along with Alexander McCorris, Alex Christopher, Daniel Davis, Larry Johnson, the Richard Barris, Viva Fry. It'll be a range of the state representative Michelle Renaud, Chase Hughes, Chase Hughes was back on with Joe Rogan this past week. He'll be there talking about CIA psyops, the Greg Hartley about interrogation, and Scott Rouse for the behavior panel about negotiation. So it's going to be, I've had a lot of people, you will not find this group of people generally available for conferences, period, least of all together in the same one. And it all goes to a good cause, 1776lawcenter.com.
I'm going to give everybody the link if you want to get there. Get your butts over there. We will definitely have. We're going to have our hot sauce, and Anton and I are working together on a hot sauce that's going to come from Biltong.
Have some Lord have mercy hot sauce. We have a former long-standing White House chef donating his time. He's usually one of those $10,000 an hour donation at charity kind of guys. He's coming down, donating his time to make some special 250th anniversary style revolutionary meals, the kind that he used to make at all times for special occasions at the White House. So he's going to be there as well. But yeah, it'd be nice to have a little biltong. We'll have some moon pies. We'll have some Swiss cake rolls, some little Debbie's, local Chattanooga, some little Chattanooga whiskey maybe. But it'd be cool if Biltong had some cool some cool ideas in that regard.
I'll talk with Anton afterwards. And by the way, go to biltongusa.com, code Barnes for 10% off.
Yeah, it's great. Better than beef jerky.
It's amazing. Bucklebrush Joe says the last word spoken by humans on Earth will be Anthony Fauci saying, "My virus worked." Yeah, and the shot didn't. But remdesivir was the name of what Fauci was.
Yeah, absolutely. And I predicted that back when I was doing a special show for Alex Jones. It's like, watch them before they promoted it. Said watch them promote remdesivir because the person who was promoting it had patents, had ties, direct personal ties to Anthony Fauci.
And it plays into the exact same modus operandi Fauci did during the AIDS epidemic when they pushed whatever it was and illegalized over-the-counter stuff, and that's how you got the Dallas Buyers Club. It's wild. All right, let's get into some of the SCOTUS stuff, Rob. Well, before SCOTUS. Don Lemons. If everybody doesn't know what the Mons labia is, look it up, but don't look it up. Don Lemons filed a motion. He got indicted by a grand jury after the judge dismissed the charges for lack of.
Just one public health notice. Don't order a lemon drop anywhere near Don Lemons. You don't want to know where he'll go next. Just say.
The lemon drop is the drink that what was his name, Robert? If I'm not mistaken,
that led to the lawsuit that got resolved. I think it's all I'm allowed to say.
The lemon drop is what the guy ordered for Don Lemon, who then stuck his fingers between his crotch and said, "Do you like penises or vaginas?" and stuck his disgusting fingers up his face. Allegedly, they settled. These are allegations. Don Lemon, he got indicted by a grand jury for his shtick with the church, where he, with the help of some activists, stormed the church in Minnesota. And the judge originally dismissed the charges on the basis that, I mean, we were right on it. I think they were not adequately. What was the basis for the charges being dropped the first time, where we said they didn't even allege what they needed to allege in order to get the charges in the first place? They went back, got a grand jury, and Don Lemon and that other activist woman got charged.
I thought I saw like 39 people have now been charged.
Yeah, there's quite a few. Don sought to get access to the grand jury material. He also sought expedited Brady disclosures. There was a third thing. Did he seek the dismissal of the charges as well? From
not yet, no.
So, but he made a motion to get the grand jury documents and a motion for expedited Brady disclosures, which he's going to get anyhow. So I didn't even understand the rationale trying to get it now. He wanted to get the grand jury documents, the statements and whatever was submitted to the grand jury, which is confidential, alleging that this is some form of malicious prosecution, that they were giving improper legal advice to the grand jury. And there was a third one. I forget what it was. I think you'll get it. But all three of his requests were denied, where the judge, oddly enough, the same judge who originally dismissed the charges, now basically saying you're not getting access to the grand jury documents, statements, testimonies on the basis of what you've alleged, because every defendant on earth is going to allege the same thing. Oh, there was impropriety before the grand jury, and now I get access to the grand jury documents. He's not getting expedited Brady disclosures. And I forget what the third one was, but you'll field it when you get there. My only question in all of this is, when, if ever, does a defendant get access to grand jury material?
So there's what they should get access to, and then what is a matter of custom and practice they actually get access to. So, in my view, constitutionally and statutorily, grand jury secrecy should be limited to two cases. One, cases where no indictment results and there's no compelling public interest to disclose what's there. The second, because the idea is that people make accusations in front of grand jurors that they're immune from prosecution or civil suit for, that it would be unfair to improperly impugn the public reputation of an individual who was subsequently not indicted. I think that's a far less compelling public concern than knowing what the heck happened, in my own opinion. But the second part is for the grand jurors themselves, their identities, what they asked, what they said. However, what's happened is that the courts have construed it to mean complete secrecy on everything that happens before a grand jury. Even when 90% of the grand jury subpoenaed records never even get looked at by the grand jury. What happens is they'll have a grand juror person sign a subpoena, but it'll be returned to the prosecutor's office in lieu of returning it to the grand jury. So they do this so they can lie to the grand jury, so they can mislead them on the law, mislead them on the facts, include evidence that they could never include at a trial. And that's how the famous statement of a federal judge that a grand jury in modern America would indict a ham sandwich if asked to do so. That is as indicting as you get. The point of the grand jury clause in the Constitution is for secrecy only to be up there to the degree it's necessary to protect the innocent and to protect the anonymity of the jurors themselves. What prosecutors said to the grand, my view is prosecutors shouldn't even be allowed in the grand jury room. So that's one of my core problems with it. They run the grand jury. They don't let grand jurors ask questions hardly at all. Grand jurors have a right to. Most of them aren't fully apprised of that, and they're intimidated in not doing so. So I am not a fan of our modern grand jury process that has made a joke of the grand jury clause of the Fifth Amendment of the United States Constitution, or maybe the Sixth Amendment. And so consequently, but what courts have done is they've said you can lie to the grand jury about the law. Now there's inconsistency. They sometimes say you don't have to tell them accurate instructions, but there's other courts that say you can't give them inaccurate instructions. Note, this judge tried to create a difference between the Comey case and this case. There is no difference. In other words, in the Comey case, the judge wanted to help Comey, so he provided all the grand jury records. In this case, the judge may want to ultimately help Don Lemon, but your average default reaction, that's why I kept saying what happened in Comey was so unusual, your reaction to the federal judiciary is to never let you see the grand jury record. My favorite part is their evidentiary standard for getting grand jury records is for you to prove something you haven't seen. How do you prove that? How do you prove something you haven't seen? Right? All you can do is allege it. You can bring inferences in. And Lemon had probably an above average case in that respect because of some dumb statements people had made in the court of public opinion. Remember we talked about this at the time, Harmeet Dillon, some other people saying things that were inaccurate about the law that could come back to bite him. But I think that the judge got some blowback and they went and indicted anyway. But what he did is he gave the default ruling. That's a rubber stamp kind of ruling. That's what they do across the country. They never let you see the grand jury transcripts to figure out what exactly happened because you're not trying to ask what the grand jury did. You're asked whether they were lied to by witnesses who weren't ever supposed to be part of the grand jury process to begin with, lied to by prosecutors who weren't part of the grand jury process to begin with. This phenomenon of prosecutors micromanaging grand jurors. And then what happened in the 80s, Supreme Court basically said, yeah, you don't have to include exculpatory evidence. Yeah, you can include fifth. I heard that Joe heard, that Jack heard, that Gene heard, that Lucy heard. This is like half of your indictments, your grand jury indictments. All they do is have the agent come in. And he gives his own interpretation, his own lay opinion, his own quasi-expert opinion, his unqualified expert opinion, his sixth-degree hearsay as to what takes place. That's how you see indictments. And later on, you wonder, how the heck did that case get indicted? That's how. So, there's no love lost, as everybody knows, between me and Don Lemon. I don't agree with this particular decision because it undermines what the grand jury clause, its independence, is supposed to be all about, which is promoting integrity, not promoting secrecy, promoting independent, ordinary civilians and citizens, being in control of our legal process, not rogue prosecutors or rogue agents. Maybe the case the prosecutors and agents did nothing wrong here at all. That may entirely be the case. But that's where transparency is the best disinfectant for corruption in our legal process. And that's what the grand jury clause was supposed to be. And instead, in the name of protecting the grand jury, they have effectively eviscerated and undermined that integrity and impartiality. Now, on the discovery aspect, the Brady disclosures, the reason I think they filed a generic Brady disclosure requirement because I think some of his lawyers are outside the state of Minnesota. More and more federal district courts impose an automatic default position that says you, the prosecutor, have to disclose this immediately as soon as you get it to be of timely use for the defense. If you don't, I might dismiss, exclude evidence, sanction you, et cetera, et cetera. So they've created the sort of automatic Brady disclosure rules that happen as soon as the case comes in, they're automatically entered. And I'm not sure why they brought the motion. It may have been they were looking to bring everything. They may not have fully appreciated that some of these courts have a default policy on this. And so the discovery has already been ordered to disclose. They're skeptical of what happened in front of the grand jury. We'll see. I think that they should have been legally entitled to it, but as a matter of custom and practice, no courts, it is very rare for courts to grant what Lemon was requesting.
Robert, you might have to refresh. You went robotic voice again. And while Robert does that, I got to make sure the dogs don't fight over there. Oh, hello. What did he do? You smell like dog food. Oh boy, get out of here. Okay, you're going to go here. Oi. Robert's going to come back in. I'm going to bring him back in. Yeah, I had a kid come and tell me that another kid is not behaving properly. Sorry, Robert, I had to go tend to the discipline of parenting. Tell a kid not to climb out of a hotel window. That's not rocket science. Okay, so here's the question that I was going to ask. Yeah, that about answers it. I didn't understand the expedited Brady disclosures. They're going to get it. I don't know.
It's because what happens is a lot of prosecutors sit on it, and then they later say, "Well, you could have filed a motion and you didn't." All that garbage, but they didn't need to request it because this judge already required its immediate disclosure. So, but not most courts don't. Increasingly, courts are doing this, so it doesn't become a problem because it is so systematic for federal prosecutors and federal agents to hide exculpatory discovery. Because sometimes the prosecutor doesn't even know about it. Only the agent does. To hide it. But here it's like, well, what exactly is going to be exculpatory? I'm not sure there's going to be. I mean, we all know kind of what happened. So it's like, I don't know exactly how there's going to be a lot of exculpatory information here. Unless somebody said something dumb in an email about Lemon or something. I just don't see it as likely. This isn't the kind of case. This isn't like we don't know what happened or it's based on a rat or informant. It's on camera what he did.
It's all from beginning to end.
Yeah.
By the way, I had to bring up the ugly one because I saw someone say what a handsome dog Winston is. I like the way Manny looks better. Just his ugly face. Okay, Robert, speaking of animals, it's sort of off topic, but we'll add it real quick. Like, you heard about the theory now that there was sabotage of the Washington Monument pool, and they arrested some Olympic kayaker who is alleged to have vandalized the pool. So people were saying it's vandalism. They're throwing algae in to make it look worse. And then I was saying, before I jump on that bandwagon, I'm going to wait a bit. But no, now they arrested an Olympic kayaker who says, I was not vandalizing it. I was just there to see what was going on. And I lifted up a piece of the plastic that had peeled off and I wasn't vandalizing it. I'm more inclined to believe that because I don't know how you get away with vandalizing the pool in broad daylight when they've got National Guard around. But the latest talking point of the day is they found a dead duck, Robert. They found a dead duck, and now the internet is on. What was the other one? I wanted to ask. Say the new dog whistle is out, but Aaron Parnas, who is always going to. A baby duck has now died at the reflecting pool. This image was shared with me in the past hour by someone who visited the reflecting pool. It's unclear what the cause of death is. Then why are you sharing it? Like, the mortality rate for baby ducks is about 30 to 50% in the first year. And I think like 70% don't make it to reproductive adulthood. But now they're going to free. This is going to be the Harambe for the left. The baby duck. Won't someone please think of the baby ducks?
Speaking of the, two other quick transitional topics before we get to SCOTUS and all the big cases coming up this week and next week. I was going to ask you what you thought about. I think you had Cal Seraphin on that whole UFC drone assassination murder plot stuff.
Yeah. So his take on it is that you're dealing with mentally ill people who are not, organized terrorists. He doesn't think that level of speech, even if you do, like in a private chat, have these fantastical, dreams of doing something that you're not physically able to do, that they were talking about detonating explosives over the UFC with drones. They had neither drones nor explosives, and so they weren't even capable of carrying out the plot they were talking about carrying out. But one of the guys did have guns, and they're clearly mentally ill, or at least some of them. So his operating theory is that they come across idiots talking shit on the internet and then turn it into a massive scandal so they can turn it into a massive win of a foil terror plot. He also is skeptical as to how much of a risk they actually thought it was, because with 18 unarrested or outstanding co-conspirators, they still held the event, and nobody looked particularly concerned. But they were clearly talking about things, planning things, whether or not it was just a fantastical LARPing. And the guy clearly was mentally ill to the point where his mother phoned it in the Friday before the event, and then he was placed in some medical hold because he had homicidal ideations, or so he thinks it might be blown out of proportion. It's interesting to see, or will be interesting to see, how many CHSs or agents or assets are among the 18 who have not yet been arrested. Like, there's no real risk if you arrested the 4 lunatics and the other 18 were, confidential human sources. But he's skeptical, and, I say rightly so in light of history.
Well, speaking of entrapment, you saw that the one of the Whitmer kidnapping verdicts was thrown out for in the state of Michigan, which is good. We call that from the very inception.
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah, and what I would say is, apparently Trump is considering, and by the way, to the Aussies who went around chanting before the U.S. game, Aussies are on a bender, Donald Trump is a sex molester. Well, that's what you get. That's why you lose 2-0, pal. That's why you lose, Aussies. You're going to be going back to Kiwi country soon enough. You're going to be hopping around with those kangaroos. You don't come to America and insult the president, even whatever you think of them. So they got smacked around by the Americans in that game. But one of the good ideas the president is considering for the 250th anniversary around July 4th, issuing 250 pardons, high-profile pardons. And I got some names I'd love to see on that list to be in the tradition. And what they should do is they should look at lawfare cases that conform to and constitutional rights and remedies cases to really restore to respect the American Republic with those pardons. And, some of the people to be at the top of the list, Julian Assange, First Amendment, Ed Snowden, First Amendment. There's limits of what they can do because he's under state prosecution for Dexter Taylor. But there's other people that have been wrongfully prosecuted. We'll get to it in a second. The Second Amendment case, Supreme Court, very good decision. That should lead to, there's pardons in the Second Amendment context they can do. Fourth Amendment violations, Fifth and Sixth Amendment violations. But look at one of the most egregious lawfare cases that took place that we talked about. The Build the Wall case. Timothy Shea is still serving 5 years, more than 5 years in a federal prison for doing something that nobody complained about other than the liberal media. He raised money to build the wall. They spent money to try to build the wall. Literally not a single person who gave money had any complaint that I've ever seen against him. And the Sovereign District of New York went and prosecuted him and Steve Bannon and a bunch of others. See, the dog's upset. Dog's like, Timothy Shea's got to be released now. So
he wants a kiss sorry.
All those anybody left on the Build the Wall, anybody left anywhere connected to January 6th, anybody left connected to the lawfare of the Biden administration, anybody left connected to the corruption of the prosecution of the DOJ, but Timothy Shea would be an excellent one to pardon as one of those 250 pardons that Trump should absolutely issue on July 4th. because it's good for the country and it's good to recognize and respect our liberty, and it's a good way for the president to exert his power. But it was shocking to me that any of these people were still in prison when that was one of the most bogus cases ever brought.
I forgot Brian Colfage. He was convicted at the state level. He's still. This is a double. He's either a double or a quadruple amputee.
Yeah, he should be acquitted. Exactly, somebody who served his country, came up with the idea to build the wall because the politicians in Washington wouldn't do it. Again, everybody who donated money had no problem whatsoever. He was effectively coerced into his confession. But remember, with Timothy Shea, the first jury wouldn't convict him, because an honest juror said the other jurors were doing this for political reasons, and this shouldn't happen. And so what do they? To me, it's a Seventh Amendment violation, or Sixth Amendment violation. I mean, remember the right to a trial in a criminal proceeding is referenced twice in the Constitution of the United States, and so to me that was a violation of that to re-prosecute him. I've always believed that, but the whole case was a joke. He was prosecuting the Sovereign District of New York, where he had never been, never lived. And again, no complaining donors. Where were the complaining donors? There were no complaining donors. So who did he defraud? He went about, and like the amount of money that they attributed to him was tiny. The tiny drop in the bucket. It was a reasonable administrative expense for the scale and scope of what they were trying to do and the political risk of blowback that they knew they were going to get. So Timothy Shea should be one of those people pardoned, along with many others. And I hope the president does follow through. Snowden would be a great name. Julian Assange would be a great name. Some prominent civil rights. What about the people that they brought up on bogus charges, claiming like the Black Hebrew group and some other groups, not like some other group. Remember, supposedly they were working with the Russians and all that nonsense. One in Massachusetts, one in Florida. All those people should be pardoned. All this nonsense, we should wash clean the docket of on the 250th anniversary of the American Constitutional Republic, and the president can start it by letting the build the wall people out of prison where they never belonged in the first place.
Yeah, well, I mean, except Brian Colfage, he pleaded. Did he plead, or was
he pled under coercion? He was facing 20 years
at the state level. I mean, it's civil rights violations, but anyhow, we'll see. But from your mouth to God's ears,
yeah,
Robert.
Timothy Shea is serving federal time.
Yeah,
he can be completely pardoned by the president and be free. I mean, the man has a young family. It's ridiculous.
Let me remind everybody, by the way, if you're watching on the landing page of Rumble, go and click on the show. Give it a thumbs up, even if you don't want. Let me remind everybody, the audio is actually not that bad, even with my computer. Make sure that you're subscribed. If you want to support the channel, the best way to do it is vivabarneslaw.locals.com. The second best way is to download Rumble Wallet at your own risks and perils. And in terms of
great, Rumble Wallet is really good. I really recommend it. I'll be doing a special class on it for vivabarneslaw.locals.com, how to use it to secure your financial freedom. Rumble Wallet is one of the tools that you should have in your toolbox, your freedom toolbox for financial freedom.
What I meant to say is, by the way, download Rumble Wallet and invest in crypto if you so choose at your risk and peril, because investing in anything is risky. But Rumble Wallet, you can hold money offline in a non-custodial wallet. Nobody can shut it down. Nobody can freeze it. You can, go anywhere in the world with it. And
hypothetically speaking, you might be able to use, put some money in Polymarket, get some successful trades in the sports and the politics world. So there's multiple forms of utility to having that. But everybody should have a little crypto in your system, and Rumble Wallet's the easiest way to get it in and out.
And if you had a little crypto, then you might be able to find a way to creatively minimize your exit taxes. Hypothetically, just saying. For future, not legal advice, people. So that's the way to do it if you want to do it, everybody. Now you know how. All right, Robert, let's get to the SCOTUS, and then we'll get to the
someone was asking about whether there were any bourbons. I was on the road this past week, so there may be some bourbons this week because I'm at least in one stable location. But I was on the road, boom, 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 all lesson.
Let's do the SCOTUS cases, Robert. So there's 3 SCOTUS cases. The one we covered back in the day, I'm looking for my camera above the. See, is the dog? The dog has found something. Oh, not a good sign. He found an insect, and I'm just going to go see now if it's a cockroach or a moth. All right. So we covered this case back in the day, which was a guy who unlawful possession of a firearm because he had it with marijuana in his. in his
basically. House. They thought he was a Pakistani terrorist. He's a U.S. Pakistani dual citizen. And he was just a Pakistani pothead. He was no terrorist. He was a Pakistani pothead. And he was such a pothead, he invited him in. They're like, hey, we're here to make sure you're not a terrorist. Oh, yeah, how you doing, guys? Hey, yeah, I got a little pot. I smoke a little weed now and then. Everything's cool, dude. Yeah, here's my gun and put this over here. Yeah, tour my whole house. Hey, do what you want. How you doing, bro? That routine. And how did they thank him? They indicted him for owning a gun while smoking, owning a gun and ever smoking pot. That's the combination.
Well, I mean, and the rationale, just for anybody who thinks you might be exaggerating, you're not exaggerating. The man was basically, they said, unlawful possession of a firearm because you have it in conjunction with marijuana, drugs. And then if anybody hears a noise, it's my dog. He's eating something, and I don't know what it is. And now I'm getting a little nervous. They said the criteria, which the Supreme Court, it was 9-0 in this case, right? It was 9-0. They said there was no historical. What's the word I'm looking for? Not analogy, but there was no historical context in which that it was intended to be that type of drug with firearms to preclude you from being able to be in lawful possession of firearms and constitutionally exercise your Second Amendment. I don't know, other types of drugs like maybe cocaine or heroin, which are more mind altering. Then you might have a historical argument for it. But 9-0, they said no. Possession of marijuana is not a preclusion to possession of a firearm and the lawful exercise of your Second Amendment rights. How many blue states are now just going to pass a law that says you can't, if you have used marijuana within the last 12 months, you can't own a firearm?
They would violate the Second Amendment under this case, because what they said is you need to show that there were laws at the time, at least if it's applied to the states, the time of the adoption of the 14th Amendment. But otherwise, it's the adoption of the Constitution itself, that there were laws in place at the founding of our country, that the why and the how are analogous to this law. And the only law the government could cite is basically the habitual drunkard laws. And so the problem with that is the habitual drunkard laws were things like you're so incapacitated, we got to put you someplace or have a custodian for you or something else. It wasn't, as they pointed out, Americans at the time of the founding were copious drinkers of the adult spirits. I think, as Rush Limbaugh used to say, just have a little adult beverage in my hand. Big Jim Folsom, I think, once called it Alabama branch water when he was sipping on a little bourbon. It was in the debate, so it was a little. The timing wasn't so great for the good governor, but that's another story for another day. And so their point was that this has the why and the how of those laws have nothing to do with this. This law just says, are you a user at any point of a controlled substance beyond its prescribed amount? If you are, you can't have a gun. If you have a gun, you go to prison. It's like, this is nuts. This is a particularly preposterous case that they did on the underlying facts, right? This wasn't like some big criminal. This was the only way they could get him. This was an innocent Joe who was just too nice to the feds who showed up at his door. Now, probably the feds were annoyed that they probably had written in their own minds, oh yeah, we've got these huge Pakistani terrorists. We're gonna get them. We're gonna nail them. We're gonna break up this big terror ring. And they show up, and the dude's a loser pothead. Probably ruin about 3 months of their fantasy work. So maybe that's why they tagged on this nonsense prosecution. But it's never made any sense. And so, in the Supreme Court laid out, none of these, the how and the why for the habitual drunkard laws are about someone who's incapacitated. This law doesn't require you to be incapacitated. It doesn't even require you to be intoxicated. It doesn't say while you're intoxicated, you can't own a gun. It says you can't ever use any controlled substance beyond its prescribed value, which, by the way, is much bigger than the illegal drugs. That includes prescriptions. And let's say you take 2 pain pills instead of 1, you take 2 sleeping pills instead of 1, boom, all of a sudden you lost your Second Amendment rights overnight. And so thank God the Supreme Court finally came in and said, that's nonsense. That isn't founded. Here's the question. Now, because Paper Plate Pam Blondie is now gone, is now out the door, there are some people speculating on the origins of that. I'm pretty sure our board was the origins of Paper Plate Pam Blondie. Why was she defending this case? This is an egregious Second Amendment violation. I think I got a debate last week with someone that was discussed in the chat. It was like, oh, Barnes is just ragging on Harvey Dillon, but this administration is doing great work for the Second Amendment. Like pushing this nonsense? It was the government that asserted this position. Pam Bondi asserted this position. They took it to the Supreme Court, asking them to reinstate this lunatic law. Thank God the Supreme Court said, niet, no. And the Second Amendment was restored in America. Now, there's a big Second Amendment case that's even of greater consequence that might come down Tuesday or Thursday this week.
Remind us again of which one that is.
Remember Hawaii came up with their creative idea that there's a default principle that if you go on any private property, even private property open to the public,
that you need to ask for permission to be carrying.
Yes. Even if the private property, it doesn't have any ban on carrying, right? This is, let's say your local Tennessee Walmart doesn't have a ban, or in this case, local Hawaii Walmart doesn't have a rule saying you can't carry or anything like that. They're okay with people carrying on their property. Why? If you were any kind of store owner, or heck, any kind of place anywhere, when you are an open carry place, the risk of you suffering a mass shooting incident goes way down. The way of you suffering crime as on a ratio basis goes down. Look at where all these big public shootings take place of all the nut jobs. It's always in gun-free zones because the shooters know nobody's going to get them first. When they make a mistake of trying to do it in a Texas church, they often get taken out before they do any damage. So this is an attempt to create a loophole so big that your only Second Amendment rights would be in your own home or on purely public property. And so this is a big, big case. Supreme Court's got to shut down this loophole, close it for good. It's never consistent with constitutional history. It was always up to it was presumed you could have that Second Amendment right to carry unless the private property that was open to the public, this isn't all private property open to the public, specifically prohibited it. But they had to specifically prohibit it. You didn't have to specifically get permission in advance otherwise. So reversing that default principle would still keep the rights of private property owners to do what they want, but it would protect Second Amendment rights and at the same time at a maximum level. So that will be I think they will rule that Hawaii's default rule is, if you look at the focal point of a lot of the pot case, they're like, look, what we're looking at from the Supreme Court perspective is this an unusually dangerous place or person for weapons to be present? And just ever using controlled substances isn't that category. But so it's got, nor is going on to the local Walmart that category.
But historically, didn't towns and villages get to declare themselves no gun zones? Like if I learned any historical lesson,
for the most part, no. Most of the part that's kind of invented history. There were some places out west that would say you had to when you came into town, but most of that has been a cinematic creation. It was not common.
I saw it in Unforgiven, and I wasn't sure if it was historically accurate. All right, and so
that was a sign. That's why Gene Hackman's character had to go down. He violated the Second Amendment start.
The other case involved Hunter Biden, and this is an interesting. I forget this one specific detail, but Hunter Biden, when he entered into a plea for his, it was for the gun charge. It was for the judge.
I think so. Yeah, because I think he has the Second Amendment argument on that case.
Yeah, and he has the drug.
And now he has the appellate waiver argument.
Yeah, well, so he waived to his right to appeal when he pleaded. The one thing I forget, I'm trying to get an answer while I talk. Did he waive his right to appeal before sentencing? Because that I guess is the crux of the issue. If you waive your right to appeal once you know the sentence, it makes sense. You've waived your right to appeal as part of the agreement. If you've waived your right to appeal as part of a plea agreement before the sentencing, and the sentencing comes down and is like ridiculous, and that you've waived your right to appeal. So in the bottom line, this was 8-1, was it? 8-1?
Well, yeah, it was a split. So you had Gorsuch wrote a great righteous concurrence. It was 8-1 effectively. Thomas wrote a dissent. And I understand where he was coming from, and we'll get to it in a second. But God bless Thomas. When it comes to criminals, he really has very little constitutional grace. But yes, otherwise it was 8-1. What you had was someone who cut a deal, got a term of probation recommended. However, the judge said as part of his supervised release, he was going to have to take forced medical medication. And this relates to another case that we're going to get into. And the other Supreme Court case, actually, of all places. This is becoming an increasing phenomenon. Like it's an extension of the COVID vaccine mandate doctrine that effectively they're looking for new creative ways to force people to take medical interventions, force things into their body that they don't want in an involuntary way. And this was issued as part of his criminal sentence. He believed that was a due process violation. So he took it up to the Court of Appeals and said, look, there should be an exception to the waiver. He signed a general waiver of his appellate rights, but he signed that before that part of the sentencing occurred. And he said, for a range of reasons, why he thought there should be an exception to the waiver in principle. The Supreme Court says, in order for it's critical, the courts have a broad duty and authority to make sure their criminal proceedings, quote, appear fair to all who observe. And if that's going to meaningfully be done, then what you have to have is some form of appellate waiver in egregious cases. They pointed out, like, what if a judge said, you're black or you're white or you're whatever, and I'm going to sentence you harsher because of that? Is that something we want an appellate waiver for? What if the judge sentenced you to a sentence that's beyond the statutory max? Is that okay? Is there no limit, no restraint? This could be humiliating to the federal judicial process. And so the court, I think, correctly said that. Now, here was the other fun part with all of this was Justice Gorsuch's, which, by the way, to their credit, Sotomayor and Jackson joined. Because Sotomayor and Jackson, I think, are more motivated by leniency towards criminal defendants. Gorsuch is on a principle basis. He says, quote, we have of coerced pleas due to judicial inaction in America. And he goes through the long history. He notes that the nation's founding, the right to trial, was considered part of every American's birthright and inheritance as an American. Plea bargains didn't even begin to emerge as an alternative to trial until the mid-19th century, more than 100 years later. And I think he's absolutely right. He's like, we need to reassert our role in the judicial branch to discourage and deter the misuse and abuse of plea power that is becoming a tool of prosecutors to coerce deals that eviscerate the right of the jury to be involved in our own criminal justice process, because that is a right that goes beyond even the individual defendant. It's not just a defendant's right or a government's right. It's a public need and constitutional process that must be constantly kept alive and afloat to keep the constitutional republic alive and afloat. Justice Thomas's point was he doesn't see any basis for setting aside pleas outside of contract principles, because he thinks that stems from the supervisory power over courts that he doesn't believe the Supreme Court has, constitutionally and statutorily. I would believe Justice Thomas that was his primary principle and sole motivation, but for the fact he spends the first 4 paragraphs bashing the defendant. As I said, when it comes to criminal defendants, he'll get some sympathy from Sotomayor and Jackson. He'll get antipathy from Alito and Thomas. It's just a way of it. But I think Gorsuch is right dead on. It's time to restore the jury trial right in America, and this is part of that process. But I agree with the decision. I would have rooted it in the Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. I would say due process of law, which says your property, your liberty, cannot be taken away from you without due process of law, allows you to set aside any waiver, appellate right waiver, when the sentencing that occurred violated your core due process right. I would have rooted it in the Constitution. I think the court made a mistake by not doing so, because that opened the door for Thomas to say, you're not citing a rule, you're not citing a law, you're not citing a constitutional provision, and what you're really suggesting is a broad supervisory authority that he doesn't think exists and that he has good argument for. But I think the due process rights are in play in this context, and that's where I agree with the decision. Then we get to they resurrected that god-awful Rooker-Feldman doctrine to screw over more people and to immunize state courts. That was the third. Before we get to the decisions that are the big ones that are forthcoming, that's the last one we have to discuss this week.
Now, hold on a second. We're gonna have to move it over to locals for the after party with premium. So maybe summarize. Tell us which ones we're waiting for from SCOTUS.
Yeah.
We'll do this and way more.
We'll cover the Rooker-Feldman case in the after party. Let's do our previews and predictions as to where the Supreme Court's going to go. First up, birthright citizenship. Will the Supreme Court say that the president's executive order is lawful and that there is no right of the citizenship by merely being born on U.S. territory?
I don't think they're going to say it. I don't think they're going to say it. I don't know how it's going to split down. They're going to say, they're going to limit it to the most egregious examples of occupying forces and diplomats, and then say for everybody else, birth tourism, it didn't exist at the time, and even if it's a problem, it should be governed with other means that will not undermine the fabric of the Constitution and being born on American soil.
Yeah, I think they're too scared, but I do think I don't think it'll be unanimous. I think it'll be maybe 6-3 is my prediction. But they'll say the president's birthright citizenship order is not constitutional. I don't necessarily agree. It's a close call to me from a constitutional perspective. Now let's go to the second case, bureaucratic power. Will they rule the president has the constitutional right to fire people in the executive branch, in this case, in the FTC case, overturning the Humphrey executor's case? Or will they say the bureaucracy is immune from the elected branch of the executive branch?
I'm going to go with what I think should be the case. They're going to say yes, but now that when you phrase it like that, they might try to protect their own, I don't know, their own skin. No, I think they're going to keep themselves unique and say, look, we're the ones who are elected for life and we can't be replaced. But all of those other lowly executive employees, I say they will. They'll say his executive order is lawful.
I'm curious how they're going to thread the needle, because here's the one where I think they do protect their own, so to speak. Do they apply the same principle to the Federal Reserve?
Mm-hmm. I think they will. I don't think or are they going to like add some criteria that it can only be done for, I don't know, not for good cause, but no, they have to. Otherwise, they are ratifying an administrative state. The only question is, who do you think are going to be the wafflers on this? Amy Coney.
Yeah, it'll be the institutionalists. I think Alito, Thomas, and Gorsuch will be really good on this. The key questions will be, where do Roberts, Kavanaugh, and Barrett go? The three liberals love the bureaucratic state, so they'll be on that side of the aisle anyway. So the key is the three institutionalists: Roberts, Barrett, and Kavanaugh. I'll say that they come up with an excuse to say something is okay with the Federal Reserve having some degree of immunity, but not to the scale that the Fed wants, because it'd be hard to conform that to the FTC case. I think the reason why both cases are taking so long is because they know the two cases have to be consistent. The third case, the big case, will they say election day means election day, not election weeks, election months, especially as it impacts mail-in voting? Does a vote have to be received in the mail by election day, or can it just be postmarked on election day and received 2 weeks later, like California is doing?
I'm going to say they are going to say election day is election day. And if it's not the case, it's because Trump has thoroughly been backstabbed and betrayed by at least one, if not two, of his picks.
I agree with you. Now, boys and girls sports. Are they going to say it's a Title IX violation to allow boys and girls sports, or say it's an equal protection violation to not allow boys and girls sports?
Title IX violation to allow boys and girls sports. It must be maybe unanimously, maybe even unanimously, at least 7-2.
Justin Jackson made dissent because what's a boy anyway?
There was no biologist there.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't see a biologist in the room. The next up, the Hawaii handgun private property Second Amendment case. Do you think that they rule in favor of Hawaii, or they say there is no such default rule, because having such a default rule to prohibit gun possession on open to the public, privately owned property would eviscerate constitutional liberty in most parts of the country?
The latter. It's going to be consistent with Bruin and the tendency of the Supreme Court. They're going to strike down the law. Oh, did I lose you, Robert? They're going to strike down Hawaii.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, I'll just double check it. Now, what about geofencing in the Fourth Amendment? That's what, remember, they do all this geofencing, and they use it, and they're using it to circumvent all the warrant requirements. Remember, this is the guy they basically they go to the cell phone companies, tell us everybody who was driving through here at any point, or was walking through here, or even in the vicinity by their phone, give us all their phone data. Then they come back and say, tell us who's that phone number that is, the DN and that part they don't without any warrant at all. Will they say that's a search that requires probable cause for a warrant? Or will they allow the tech surveillance state to completely gut the core of the Fourth Amendment in a going forward perspective?
They're going to side on the side of the Constitution.
Yes, I hope so too. We got to put those good mojos. And speaking of good mojo that we need to do, the other two big ones are tax forfeiture. This is when they took this nice old lady's home, she owed like $2,000 in tax. They go do a bogus auction, and when they do the bogus auction, the government does a creditor bid and basically gets a $150,000 house for $2,000, and they say we get to keep all of it. where you get to take a $2,000 tax bill and steal a $150,000 house. Will they say that's a violation of the takings clause of the Constitution?
Yes, they will. Even Ketanji Brown Jackson might say so.
Yeah, it's a sweet old lady. You can't throw her out on the street with nothing. And then last but not least, the case I'm really hoping goes the right way, glyphosate. Will they say there's federal preemption and special immunity for Bayer to poison our food supply with glyphosate? Or will they say no, yet no such exemption is there?
No such exemption is there. And it should be unanimous.
It should. The three corporatists, the three institutionalists, and the three corporatists are the big risk in a lot of these cases. Barrett, Kavanaugh, and and Roberts. So we'll see. We got some big cases with big consequence for the court of law, the court of public opinion, and for our everyday well-being and welfare, depending on what happens. Some of these can be reversed, like the glyphosate immunity. If they rule that can be reversed with future legislation. But some of them can't be reversed. Sometimes can't be reversed in a good way, like the Fourth Amendment and the Second Amendment. Others that can't be reversed in a bad way, like birthright citizenship being fully and firmly established. Because that would require a constitutional amendment to reverse. So it will be a pact. You'll have no lack of subject matter for the next 2 weeks because it's Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Thursday. Done a bunch of decisions, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can go to the Supreme Court website, and that's when they drop it.
All right, now we're going to go over to locals because I'm being summoned for a Father's Day hike. The kids want to go for a walk, but they're not going for a walk without me. So we're going to do that in a bit. We're going to go to locals and Rumble Premium. We're going to raid Barry Cunningham now, who's new to the Sunday show, I guess. We're /raid. Come on over to vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Stick around. There will not be a show tomorrow on my end. I'll be with Tim Pool tomorrow night, but we're going to go for a hike and explore where we're at. And maybe not Tuesday because I might be on the road again, but we'll get back to the schedule later this week. And Robert, you're going to be...
Ask Tim if he really believes what... he was making certain predictions, but I didn't know if they were like his actual predictions or just, ideas that to get out there. If he really has confidence in certain House and Senate races, I'm happy to wager, Tim. So you can say that...
Robert, you have to refresh yourself. That was all in robo voice, but we did understand. You did say if Tim wants to make a bet to do it. Okay, now we've rated Barry Cunningham. Say hi, although I know that there's been some friction between our respective audiences. Bada bing, bada boom. Let's see. Are you better?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Okay, there was a lot. Yeah, I could hear you. There was about a half-second delay there. Okay, we are updating. We're going to Rumble Premium. We're going to vivabarneslaw.locals.com, and we're going to get to the tip questions there and the two remaining